a certain very successful, flashy realtor whose name might rhyme with Mamakia came by and said, "Oh, it's Ken Olson, the king of REOs." And I was like, "Oh, wow, king of the REOs. I kind of like that." He's like, "I remember you back in the day."
Yeah, that's
So that was like, to me, that was kind of, one of the most amazing compliments you could get from Mr. Ramakia.
did you say that rhymes with Malakia?
So anyway, I think that, like, I know that we've even though we've been through all kinds of markets, and the market that we've had certainly in the last 2.5 years has been a market of great affluence and ease, and certainly has made it look like the role of a realtor is very easy. Just get dressed up and drive those fancy cars and make millions of dollars. But I know some people on this call, specifically, I'm looking at my friend Jenny, know that it is it's a slog every day. We work really hard for what we do. And one of the things that we can do now in this time of uncertainty is to get better at our craft, is to become better realtors, find other ways to make sure that we're able to deal with different kinds of clients. And this will come back around. The real estate owned, bank owned foreclosure properties is bound to happen as people went like woo crazy over the past couple of years. Maybe not in the same way that we had the emergence of REOs and bankruptcies from the last crash, because that was really around banking, I think, for the most part. But I still think we're going to be finding more and more properties coming up in this area. And there's no one better than to help us, add to our toolbox than our own Kenny Olson. So I asked Kenny to talk to us this morning about his experience with that market. I know he has a great presentation. Hi, I'm going to ask you to mute. Um, a great presentation. He's going to, really talk through a little bit about his background and then go to the presentation. And then we really want to leave some good time for questions, because this is the wild, wild west. And I'm sure folks have questions about where to start, how to go about it, what do they need to look for, all of those things. So with all of that long introduction, Ken, I'm going to turn it over to you.
And you can hear me okay?
We sure can.
Okay, terrific. Thank you for the kind words, the introduction. And I've been impressed by what you have done in the conventional real estate world. With you're considered in my eyes to be a luxury agent. So happy to join you today. Thanks for the honor, the privilege to share what I've experienced. I'm not sure at this point if it's ever going to be at the level that it was at when the market cratered. And when I got involved, I got my license in '89, and I didn't know what I was running into in 1990 and 91. That was considered to be a down market coming off of 87 and 88 high markets. So I'm this new licensee, 1989, early 20s, and not realizing everyone's about to exit, or a lot of people that it was their real estate profession, they were about to exit because a listing was not a sale. And a lot of buyers weren't buying. Interest rates were considerably higher. And there's always market challenges. Right now, the market challenge for us is, we've grown accustomed to interest rates in the 2s and the 3s. And now we're going to need to get accustomed to interest rates in the 6s. And a lot of the buyers that were qualified to buy, they're still qualified. They're just not going to be able to buy what they wanted to buy. So they may be sitting on the sidelines because they have these expectations that now needs to be managed. It's like you say, I want to spend $20,000 on a car, but you like all $35,000 cars, but it's not your budget. So a lot of what I'm hearing, and I'm not here to be a buzzkill, I'm really here to be a reality check. With 32 years of experience, a lot of what I'm hearing is these rates at 6 is going to be an attractive rate. And the Fed is talking about these rates going into the 7s, the 8s, the 9s, which sounds incomprehensible coming from the 3s. So there's certainly going to be a lot of people that are not going to be able to afford their homes. Foreclosures they're always going to happen, not the volume that we saw in the 91, 92 market, not the volume that we saw in the 2008, 2009 market. But who knows? This is one person speculating. I feel like a lot of people still have equity in their home. If you purchased a home in 2017, 18, 19, you're sitting on equity. And so if you're no longer in a position to afford your mortgage, you might say, well, why don't I sell it? And that becomes less possible when you owe more than the value. And that's when people get foreclosed on typically. So a little bit of my background. When I got involved in real estate, my first year, I made $7,000. And I was part-time teaching. And when I say teaching, I was substitute teaching. I just graduated college in '88. And I needed $50 a day to survive. I was living at home. I had gotten my real estate license and I was struggling, which is not a bad thing. But I was hungry, and I was working with buyers who ultimately didn't buy with me. I went on listing appointments with sellers who ultimately didn't list with me. And I was trying to find my way. And so there was a house that was on the market. And when I do my presentation, you'll see the actual house, which opened my eyes to this REO world. And if you're looking to get into this world, you should know the nomenclature. You should know some of the vernacular. REO means real estate owned. BPO means broker price opinion. And, owner occupant means that it's the owner that occupies the house. Debtor in possession means owner occupied. Tenant in possession means that there's a tenant. Kind of sometimes the phrases are exactly what they say they are. So, but these are things when you're talking to an asset manager, and an asset manager is someone who manages a portfolio for, Freddie Mac, which is Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corp, Fannie Mae, Federal National Mortgage Association. These were my clients, and I had hundreds of them. I had about 150 clients. And at any given time, I was handling hundreds of assets for them. And so I'm going to go over the mistakes that I made to help you avoid them. But if you're like me, you probably are going to need to make the mistakes to learn from them. So here I was, 1989, getting my hat handed to me, knowing that I wanted to be a real estate agent. And so I was trying to figure my way. So I heard about a property that had gotten foreclosed on in my market. And the address, I knew who the owner was. And there was an individual that was handling the Freddie Mac account. And I called him and I asked him, I said, why are you saying Freddie Mac? Freddie Hojat owns that house. And he said, no, Freddie Mac is the bank. And that's how green I was. And when he told me what he told me, he had no idea the eyes that he opened that day. He said, oh, that's Freddie Mac. I made $27,000 with that account that last year. And when I heard that, and I had made 7,000 struggling, and then I heard some more magic words. It's vacant, it's on lockbox, and you can show it whenever you want. So now it's an absentee owner, because that's another phrase for a corporate client who owns it. They're absent, they're in another state typically. So it just became really attractive for me. And then the market fell into my lap, so to speak. And I started hawking the newspaper, the Banker and Tradesman, predominantly, and just started paying attention, to what was being foreclosed on in my market, and barked up a lot of the wrong trees, calling the auctioneer, thinking they could assign me the property, calling the foreclosing attorney, thinking they could assign me the property, and not realizing you have to get to the decision maker, which is the asset manager. And that can be a tricky game because sometimes the asset manager changes, and sometimes they outsource the asset management. So I just became a bird dog. And I made it uh, my job to figure out who was handling a particular asset. And then I was going to solicit the assignment, and I was going to tell them something about the property. Hey, it's vacant, it's unsecured. Or, that property is occupied, and I would just, can I do a value for you? To try to be a value add. And so there was one particular woman with Freddie Mac. Her name was Noni Kokinda. She was the first one to really give me a break. And I was going to Florida for the holiday. It was in December. And I was driving, and she wanted to meet with me. There was no Zoom at the time. She said, if you're really interested in handling properties for me, then I want to meet you. And I'm thinking, oh, I can't disguise my age anymore, because you could hide behind, a phone. But when I met with her, it broke the ice. And I drove to Washington, D.C., which is next to McLean. I changed. I put a suit on in a bathroom at a mall, and I went into this meeting. And when I was done with the meeting, she said, she asked me a question. She said, "What's your BPO turnaround time?" And she said it with, and I did not know what a BPO was. But I recognized that she needed it, and seemed like a sense of urgency. So my response was, I can get it to you as fast as you need it, and because if I said I don't know what a BPO is, then that wouldn't have been impressive. And I'm trying to earn her business. So the interview, I thought, went well. I got in my car, proceeded to continue to drive to Florida, and I get a phone call, and she says, "Your first assignment it was a property in Mansfield." And I'll have an image of the slide. And that was my first account. And when I got the Freddie account, I landed the Fannie account. When I got the Fannie account, I landed the Citi account. When I landed the Citi account, all the accounts started coming, because I could say I have the Freddie and the Fannie account. And so that became validation for more assignments. And then I just set up a whole business model around it. Yeah.
Okay.
So this slide, build the ark before the flood. If people think the REO flood is coming, then it's going to be a pretty good idea to start to figure out how to get involved. And actually, EXP has a department that they have set up where I'm not sure if he's referred to as an asset manager, but he has a lot of corporate accounts he's been lining up. And with the 83,000 agents that are in our network, there's going to be significant reach into all markets. So it's going to make things more convenient in order to identify an agent. So I'm sure there's going to be training involved, course requirements involved in order to be eligible. But in order to get yourself appointed to be able to handle one of these assignments, I would think first thing you would do is get a hold of the person in charge at EXP that handles the REOs. And then as far as paying attention to the market, like that's something that I've always done. The Boston Globe no longer prints a lot of the auctions. It's really the Sunday Boston Herald is where you'll see most of the properties. And then there's all of the advertising has the website for the actual auction house. So you can go to their website and you can identify properties that are coming up. And let's go to the next slide, please. Actually, this was the Freddie Mac house. It was owned by Freddie Hojat, and here I was thinking that he had the wrong seller in MLS. But this opened my eyes. And as I already mentioned, my first year, what I earned and what I heard this person earned with one account, it just I was excited because I realized, wow, this is right in my backyard. I can make this happen. Next slide. Next slide. So these are I would take a picture of this because these are the websites that you're going to want to go to if you're looking to identify. And it's become much easier. When I started, you literally needed to get the local paper for the town that the auction was being held in. And occasionally it would get syndicated to the Herald or the Banker and Tradesman. But the notices used to just be published in the local, like my town is Foxborough. And so I'd get the Foxborough Reporter. And that's where I would have to, predominantly see auction notices for Foxborough. And then if I wanted to go to a neighboring town like Sharon, I'd have to get the Sharon Mirror. And if I wanted to do, Attleboro, I'd get the Sun Chronicle. So, and there were literally guys that would get 40 or 50 papers delivered to their house on a weekly basis. And that's how they would cull the information. So you can clearly see how much easier the information has gotten and how much more streamlined it has become. I listed the majors here. There's probably another 10 or 15 auctioneers, but these are the, the ones that are the bigger players in the market. Next slide. So staying in your lane, this is really important. I made this mistake and I was told I was making the mistake, but my ego and my appetite didn't allow me to pull it back. I should have stayed in my lane, which I refer, it's a metaphor for staying in my market. You know your market better than other markets, and you need access to these properties. These asset managers are now requiring timestamped photos. They want to see that you're inspecting the property once or twice a week. When I started, that wasn't the case. So there's much more micromanagement, but an avenue that's easier to travel down. I used to have to fund a lot of setting up the property, the rekey, the winterization, the snow plowing, the lawns, putting all the electric bills in my name. These are things that you don't have to do anymore. A lot of these are handled by asset management companies. So they've made it so it's more convenient. So when I say stay in your lane, I'm in Foxborough. So my focus should really be Norfolk County. I touch Bristol County, so maybe sections of Bristol County. But when you start to stretch your market, I started to take inventory west of me, then way west of me, Worcester, and then Springfield. It was a mistake and I wouldn't do it. But if you stay in your lane and focus, you'll find that you'll be doing the asset manager a service. You'll be doing yourself a service versus doing both of yourselves a disservice by handling inventory out of your market. So next slide. So what you have, empathy is a huge part of when you're dealing with a debtor in possession or a holdover tenant. You have to, in my mind, you have to really look at, hey, this could be me on the other side of this. So a level of decorum and empathy and respect. And when I say being sensitive, not talking to somebody like, hey, you put yourself in this position, you knew you needed to make your mortgage payment. You don't know what they're dealing with. You don't know what health issues they're dealing with. You don't know what, what's going on with their kids, what's going on with their relationship if they're married, and the job loss. There are just so many variables. So being respectful and talking to someone like you would want to be talked to, a level of civility. And that's something that I got good at over time. And so I was never afraid to go to a door. And that can be intimidating for sure, because you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know if you're going to get a pit bull or if you're going to get, someone that is a Lhasa Apso, and they're going to roll over and say, hey, I know we didn't make the payment and we're leaving. And you just don't know. Then you could have someone say to you, they're going to have to carry me out of here in a body bag. And I've had people tell me that. But again, being respectful. Next slide. So that's more of just being human, not being robotic, and just a level of understanding and empathy, and talking to someone like, again, you would want to be talked to. It's kind of like the old rule of thumb that hopefully our parents taught us, with being respectful. So next slide, Lisa. So this is something, there's a lot more activism going on, a lot more consumer protection. So a debtor in possession, a holdover tenant, they have rights. In Massachusetts, those rights, they could have tenant advocacy groups who are going to fight for them to stay put and try to maybe overturn the eviction or overturn the foreclosure. In other states, when you lose the house, you got to go. The sheriff can come and move you. But there is due process in Massachusetts. So in Massachusetts, it's just a consumer advocate. And so if somebody wants to lawyer up, or if somebody wants to put up a fight, they can do that. And I've seen people in their homes 2, 3, 4, 5 years plus after the foreclosure sale. So there's a lot of, in Massachusetts, that can be a challenge. But on the bright side, when somebody loses their home at foreclosure sale in Massachusetts, and I'm only talking about Mass, I'm not talking about other states. So a graceful way of giving assistance, again, knowing the vernacular, cash for keys, relocation assistance. So believe it or not, someone could not make a mortgage payment for multiple years and they get paid to leave. And it kind of sounds like, how is that even possible? But believe me, it's worth it to give someone cash for keys in order to have access to the house sooner. And so that's a real common way to help bridge that debtor in possession, that tenant, to their new home, to help with the first, last security, to help with moving expenses. That number has grown over the years. I was talking to somebody yesterday that said they had given someone $40,000 to leave. Cash for keys and relocation assistance, get familiar with those phrases. The more you increase your foreclosure IQ, the more an asset manager is going to want to work with you, and because they don't want to teach, they want to hand a file over and know that it's being managed properly. And so if they're teaching you as they go, they're not going to be excited about that. So just again, be cognizant of that. So I was explaining that I was talking to somebody yesterday that had given a $40,000 cash for keys. It was someone who had bought a property at auction. So when a property goes to foreclosure sale, the bank can be the high bidder. An investor can be the high bidder. If an investor is the high bidder, it's their responsibility to pay the back taxes, to pay the back water, any municipal liens. If it's a first mortgage that's being foreclosed on, any mortgages behind it get wiped out. So a lot of times when people are trying to get involved with short sales, the reason that the short sales don't get consummated is because there's a second and a third, which brings the debt higher than the value. And those have to be wiped out by a foreclosure sale. So the first mortgage steps in and says, hey, we're foreclosing. And the second and the third, whoever is in back position, if there is a back position, they can show up at the auction and bid on the property. But if they don't bid, and the total sale, the total number that the high bidder is willing to pay, it can wipe the second's position out. It can wipe the third positions out, or in other words, it can wipe the back positions out. So that's why a lot of lenders don't want to be in second and third position. They want to be in first position, because if they foreclose, then proceeds would cover their debt that they lent on the property. So that $40,000, the reason the person spent that kind of money, they had bought the property very right at auction. When I say very right, very under fair market value, and they left themselves enough margin or enough cushion where they could offer the occupant $40,000. So one last important point to mention here. If a property goes to foreclosure sale, and there's $100,000 owed, and let's say the value's 250, and the bidding gets up to 200,000. The surplus of 100,000 goes to the debtor, does not go to the bank. So it's a protection in Massachusetts in order for that equity to be going to the debtor. So, and I personally
Can you
think that's,
repeat that? Can you repeat that? That just
yeah,
brain's
yeah,
going.
this is really important to understand. So, and I use round numbers. Okay, so if the mortgage amount owed is $100,000, and we know fair market value for the property is 250,000. Okay, these are just examples, round numbers, and the bidding gets up to $200,000. So someone says, "I'll pay 200,000." So that means they're 100,000 over what was owed. That 100,000 goes to the debtor, does not go to the bank. So it's called a surplus. Now there'll be expenses that come out of the surplus. The auctioneer gets paid out of the surplus. The foreclosing attorney gets paid out of the surplus. And if there's a second mortgage, they get paid out of the surplus. So it's something that's not understood. A lot of times people think they should have just sold it. And yeah, they should have just sold it. But if they sold it, they'd have to get it market ready. If to get it market ready is going to cost them money that they don't have. So let's say they got it market ready and it's worth 300,000, and they put that money into it. They're going to lose that money. Why? So in some instances, it's called a strategic foreclosure, and that's another. These terms just roll off my tongue because it's my world. But strategic foreclosure is what was going on in 2008 and 9. People were literally calling the bank and saying, "We're going to give you the keys. Where do we mail you the keys?" Because they recognize they put no money down, and they can't afford the house anymore, and they want to move on with their life. So next slide. I'm not sure. Oh,
Yep.
Yeah. So being the eyes and the ears of the seller is how you add value. So I mentioned the timestamp photos, the weekly reporting, the initial broker price opinion. They're going to be looking for updated market, and BPO is a term we call it a CMA. And just like at an auction, you sign what's called a memorandum of sale, but conventionally it's called a purchase and sale. So again, some of the phrases, the monthly reporting, the weekly reporting. When I was running a pretty significant operation, I had 2 cars on the road all the time with people just going around taking photos of the property and that were time stamped. And they would also go and inspect them, because you just never know when there could be a break-in, or if there's a water leak. You stay in front of it by staying in front of the property. Again, if you don't have the assignment and you're able to give the asset manager some intelligence, maybe they'll consider you for the assignment. But a lot of these asset managers, when people are doing broker price opinions prior to the auction, they're pledging to the agent that's doing the broker price opinion that, hey, if this ever becomes a foreclosure and we are assigning it, you'll get the assignment. So you really want to be able to put yourself in a position to be doing the BPOs. In the BPOs, they'll pay you in the neighborhood of $50 to $75. The forms are typically very simple forms, looking for 3 comparables, ideally sale comps, not current comps. So next slide. So you do need a strong stomach. In some instances, a strong stomach to walk into a property. You have to understand it's the last line of defense for people. So usually everything else has gone, in terms of credit cards, in terms of car loans, student loans, personal loans. So, and a lot of times they're not maintaining the property because they can't afford to maintain the property. And sometimes when I say weak, you need a strong stomach, not only emotionally, when you're dealing with people that have a hardship in their, sharing with you what went on, and you're reporting this back to the asset manager, but also sometimes when you go into a vacant property, I've seen people throw up because of the smell, and they just can't believe people live like that. But it happens. And so having a stomach to manage both, the stepping over dog shit, walking into a house where they didn't let the animal out, they just let them go in the house, and again, to the personal hardship that people are dealing with, and being empathetic to it. I cannot stress that enough. Recognizing that could be you, or that could be a family member of yours, and you just treat them with respect. They're already down and out. They don't need to be kicked any more than they've been kicked. Next slide. So this was my first assignment. This was an $80,000 property. And you might say to yourself, like, why wouldn't somebody pay $80,000? That was the market, picture today's market. This house is, a 600 house, maybe it's a 700 house. So it's, that was the assignment. Noniko Kinda called me. I was, getting in between McLean, Virginia and driving to Florida. And she said, hey, we're going to give you a shot. This is your first listing. And that was it. And then I was off and running. Next slide. It might be the end of the show. Yeah.
Yep.
So we're at 12:37. Lisa and I discussed leaving time for questions and answers because it's more about you, and how I can, serve, our family of 83,000 EXP agents and add support, add some intelligence. And so if you got questions, I'll field them.
Absolutely. So put some questions in the chat. Also, you can raise hands. I certainly have a couple off the top of my head, Kenny, just to keep our conversation kind of going. I know you talked about the list um, of foreclosure resources in terms of finding property, but what I've run into over these years is a client saying, "Hey, I think that house down the street is I think they're going to be going into foreclosure." And I have had a very difficult time identifying how to find out about that house, and then who, talk a little bit about, what are those steps? And I
Yeah.
know it looked like I had to pay for a website or a subscription to something to get more information, and then the whole asset management piece. If it's something that someone has brought to your attention in one of the neighborhoods that you frequent, and you know that home is probably in foreclosure or going into foreclosure, just give us an outline of what we do next.
Yeah. So I call it sleuthing. In sleuthing, the neighbors know what's going on. Go talk to a neighbor. Oh, Mrs. Harold, she died 2 years ago, and her son moved out and they're looking to sell. So the neighbors will tell you what's going on with the property a lot of times, and then you need to go to public records and identify how to contact somebody. Some people do it by mail. Some people do it by identifying a phone number. The neighbor may have the phone number of who to contact, and then you talk to the son and the son says, oh, we're not doing anything with the house right now. Or the son says, as a matter of fact, we're looking to put it on the market, so you just don't know where it is in the process. If the mom died and it's being probated, may take a year, before it can be sold, because they're waiting on a license to sell. So, I know a lot of times you drive by a house and you see the grass overgrown and you see that it's not being maintained. So you can make assumptions that it's a foreclosure or going into foreclosure. And it's usually a reasonable assumption, but you don't always know. So just as something as simple as knocking on the neighbor's door, And, being, if you're professionally dressed, they'll be probably more receptive to you. I tend to, when I knock on a door, I knock on the door and then I step back from the door, very intentionally, because I want to be disarming, versus someone opening the door and you being right there in their face. And then a lot of times if nobody's around, you've got to go back. You're trying to figure out how to get a listing. And so is it worth your time? Yeah, it's worth your time. So I would say that would be the number one way to figure out, okay, who can I contact that's a decision maker here, knocking on a neighbor's door.
Yeah, no, that's really great. There's some questions in the chat. Let me get to. So Dick asks, where does a new agent find these opportunities?
So a new agent, when you say opportunity, I mean, you're driving, you should have a pad of paper and a pen next to you. And when you see a property and we all drive by them, maybe not as much as we used to because the market has been so strong for so long. And a lot of these properties, they've already been repurposed. Somebody knocked on the door before we did, and bought it and rehabbed it. So if you're looking to track the foreclosures, it would be the Sunday Herald. It would be the Banker and Tradesman that comes out on Monday. It would be going to those auction sites, Dick. And those auction sites there's usually a photo of the property. There's the date of the sale, the time of the sale. And, so you start tracking properties in your market. There has been an uptick in foreclosures. But again, staying in your lane, I would focus on properties that are in your market. So how many could that possibly be? 1 or 2 a month. But then the other way to do it is just, again, you see a vacant property, bird dog it. That's old school, but that's what works. That's what I've always done. Matter of fact, I have an agent I'm working with now, and I have an uncle that on his walking route, there were 2 properties. He called me a couple of days ago. He gave me 2 addresses, exactly the scenario that I'm explaining to you. And I had given her the addresses, grass overgrown, property not being maintained. And so I'm working with her. And part of that is, she's not in a position at this point to knock on a door and be comfortable, but I would do that, with the agent, Dick, that you're working with. And the other thing is absolutely have them figure out if they can identify a phone number before you go to the door, and then be involved with that phone call. That, hey, 123 Maple Street, it looks vacant, and I'm looking at a public record. It says that you're the owner. Are you the person that I should be speaking to, regarding selling the property? And again, simple dialogue, natural dialogue for agents.
Yeah, for sure. Let me get to the 2 questions, people that have their hands raised. Kareen, you had a question?
Hi, Corrine.
Hi, Kenny. Dorothy was first. Dorothy,
Okay,
do you
I'm
care?
sorry. Dorothy, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hi, Dorothy.
Hello, Kenny. Hi. Thank you, Corinne, and thank you, Lisa. That was awesome.
Oh, thank
So you're very welcome. My very first listing coming back into real estate was a short sale. I didn't have anything else going on, which was to my advantage because I got them everything they wanted within 30 minutes. And if it needed a signature, I got it in less than 24 hours. They couldn't believe it. And I thought, well, isn't that normal to do it like that? And I guess some agents are too busy or whatever. And so what would be the best way to introduce yourself to the banks and the Freddie Macs, et cetera, as someone who has some experience that was positive and who would like to get back into this market?
So when you look at the notices, you're not going to see this on the websites, but what you will see on the auction notices is there's a foreclosing attorney. So, building a relationship with a foreclosing attorney, and I'm not saying they're going to give you the time of day, but I am saying that if you're persistent, you can start building a Rolodex or a contact list. I always say Rolodex, that's 80s term. Build a contact list of attorneys that handle short sales, attorneys that handle foreclosures. The short sales can be tricky because they're involved. You're asking for debt forgiveness prior to the auction, and you're really with the market escalating in values, covering a first and a second. So this, a lot of times the second's like, no, I don't want to negotiate. The second's 50,000 and that's what we're getting paid. They don't want to hear that short sale means they're going to have to take 20,000. So being understanding of that, but I would just do what I did. I just started to build a contact list and started reaching out how I could be a value add. And when you bring somebody business, there's a level of reciprocity that can happen. But good for you that you consummated a short sale, because those are not easy. Those can be a real challenge. And I don't expect everyone to understand the way I'm explaining this, because this is in 1 hour crash course and something that I've done over 32 years. I'm happy if you've got a question, you can feel free to reach out to me directly and I can answer it. But showing that you're a value and there are attorneys that focus on doing short sales. And maybe that attorney that you were using, were they just happening to represent that client, Dorothy, or was that something, when I say client, I mean seller client, not, lending client? Do you know who you were dealing with how they were involved with the transaction, the attorney? You're muted, or I can't hear you.
I did not deal with an attorney. I dealt with a short sale company. And I was told it was the same as doing a 1031, that with a short sale, you had to go through these licensed short sale companies. And
okay. Then I would develop, that's even better. That's their business model. So now they saw how, I call it a bird dog. I mean, what you did with getting signatures and getting answers in a timely fashion means that you were on the case. And a lot of times, as you mentioned, agents get too busy and they think this isn't going to come to fruition. And, it's a 9-month process to figure it out. And ultimately, it may end up where the property has to go to foreclosure sale and I'm out. When it goes to foreclosure sale, it's over in terms of if you were trying to do a short sale. I was talking to an agent very recently. He's 9 months in on a short sale scenario. And I told him when he was 30 days in how long it was going to be. And he told me that, oh, no, it's going to be sooner than that. And so we're in July. I started talking to him, I want to say in the fall. It was definitely the fall. And I reached out to him pretty recently. I'm actually pursuing this individual as an EXP agent and trying to coach him up.
I was going to say, it takes about the same amount of time there.
Yeah, no, amen. It does. It's for those of you that are trying to build your revenue share, it's a process. There's a lot of transition when somebody there's a lot of follow up. That's the better word. Yeah. But Dorothy, I would just get a hold of that short sale company and let them know you're open for business. If they like the way you performed the last time, you'll do even better the next time.
Yeah, for sure. Kareen, your question?
Yeah, actually, it's more of a comment than a question that I've run into in the past with clients that are so like hyper focused and, oh, I want to buy a short sale or I want to buy a foreclosure, and they send me this like house that they found in some notice or on the Z word, and I'm like, okay. So then I look it up and I in the past I've contacted the bank. And because it's been a local bank, and they're like, yeah, okay, they were late, they got the notice, it's automatic, it's this, it goes to the Z word, and then we're working with them. So my comment is that sometimes these foreclosures or pre-foreclosures, that's what they are, the pre-foreclosures that show up don't always end up in foreclosure if the owner can work out, something with the bank. Either way, it's a process.
It's a process, and you need to make a decision if you want to participate in that process. And I originally, when short sales started to become the buzzword, and I'm going back over a decade, and when I realized how arduous, time consuming, and, with a remote chance that this is ever going to end in a commission check, I recused myself on a regular basis. Like, people would say, "Will you help me through the short sale?" I'm like, "I'm not your guy," and I would just let them know, I'm not the person to handle the short sale, because I just understand all the hoops that have to be jumped through in order to get it there, and I'd rather disappoint them in that one quick conversation than take it on and disappoint them over a 9-month period. So short sales are definitely for people that's their focus and they're committed to it. But if you're trying to do one-offs on short sales, you're better off finding that buyer client a house, that they don't, a house that is ready to go, ready to be moved into, so that would be my advice. I in my career, I have done 0 short sales, not one.
We did one and it was ugly. It was a luxury actually in Truro, but as you say, it's so rough with emotion. I mean, it's kind of like probate on top of I don't know what. It's just it rarely brings out the best in anyone because it's a super distressed environment. And I love what you consistently said, Kemny, which is that you've got to have empathy on every side of this, including the asset manager whose hair's on fire probably 24/7 because he's got his bosses and then he's got all these agents out here with a variety of skill sets and commitment level, right? And he's got houses that are being broken into and all kinds of things. I mean, it's just it definitely is it's a choice to enter this piece of business, but like you also said, you come from contribution. I mean, someone needs to help these folks out. Someone who has a positive mindset, someone who understands the gravitas of the situation, so I really respect that. There's a gal who had her hand up and then she just dropped off and now I think she's coming back in. Let me get to some other questions in the chat. I know Louise had a question. Louise, did you want to unmute yourself because you were talking about listings,
Sure.
foreclosures, and
Yeah, so is it always the case that with a foreclosure, only the first debtor gets paid off?
So back to that example, and sometimes this example, literally you have to hear it 10 times to understand it because it took me a long time for it to filter. So let's say 100,000 is owed. That's the first position. And let's say that the second position is 50,000 and that the value is 125.
Mm-hmm.
So now that second says, wait a minute, I'm owed 50. If you sell it for 125, that means I'm going to get 25. And they're actually probably going to get less than that because there's other expenses that come along with it. So the second is not an enviable position. And a lot of seconds will say, well, I'll just let it ride, let it go to foreclosure sale. And if it sells for 200, my number gets covered. If it sells for 140, then I'm negotiating 10,000 off of the 50 that I would have gotten. So the reason that the seconds and the thirds take those positions because they're getting a higher rate of interest. So it's a riskier loan for them. And they understand that there's a good chance it's going to be non-performing, but they're hoping there'll be enough of an equity buildup over time that it'll cover, what their second position is, what the third position is, and plus they're hoping, hey, the first will get paid down. So the second is the short sales become treacherous because you have institutional sellers that can't make decisions. It has to go up, the the chain of command for decisions to be made. You know, it could get to one person and they could say, oh yeah, we'll do this, but I have to get my boss to sign off on it. And then the boss says, well, I have to go into a meeting and we have to go over the portfolio of what we're willing to take. It's a challenge when you're dealing with short sales.
Yeah, I've done a bunch. I put in the chat that, does anyone remember the CDPE designation back, like you said, a decade ago? Certified Distressed what was it? Certified
Property
Distressed
expert.
Property Expert, yes. When things changed around, I stopped using that designation. It's kind of a negative thing, right?
I'm a CDPE.
CDPE.
I've never even heard of it, actually, so I appreciate the knowledge.
It was a big, long class, and yeah, it was really interesting, but we needed to do that back then. And even though I didn't do a ton of short sales, I did enough of them and work with negotiators. And yeah, having the second lien or a third, oh my God, getting those, very challenging. So if you can do that, you can do anything.
I'll tell you what,
You can do
you're right
agent
on.
attraction now. Think of that.
Yeah. So I think one of the things I would suggest to everybody is if you're interested at all, we have an amazing REO certification program in EXP World, and I would definitely look into that. It's free training for you to learn a little bit more, probably of the buzzwords, and which I think is important because then you can at least have those conversations. You only need to know a little bit more than the next guy, in order to get in there if that's something that you're interested in doing. And I know lots of folks, I want to say lots of single moms, but I do, that did BPOs back in the day when they needed to, because it was cash that was in when they were, in between. And, you started by saying a listing is not a sale. And I want to say that a majority of the 1.56 million, seriously, realtors today, that's realtors, that's NAR realtors, that's not real estate salespeople, have no idea that that's a true fact. A listing is not a sale. When you said that, I was laughing to myself because, they always tell, listers last, all everything's listing, but nowadays that's a paycheck, and you don't even need to wait 2 months.
Yeah, so my sister and I, so she got her license in 86, and like yourself, she was a RE/MAX agent. And so I get my license in 89, and we went on 24 listing appointments, and we went 24 for 24.
Nice.
And we sold 8 of those. So I remember that math, and a listing is not a sale. We're in a market where a listing is a sale.
Yeah.
We may be coming out of that market. We just don't know. And I don't know if there's going to be a flood of REO. I was listening to someone this morning. I would consider them to be pretty sharp. And who knew that the 2020 March pandemic would cause the market to rise 40%, right? And, just like we're saying to ourselves now, well, the foreclosures are imminent. They have to happen now. People have equity. People need a place to live, and a lot of people can afford their mortgage payment, and I don't know that we're going to see the volume that everyone is waiting for. And I'm not saying we're not, but
Some
I'm
of
saying
those mortgages
I
were
don't
at
know.
275. Those mortgages were at 275 and 3.5, so people can pay those mortgages. If you looked, I don't know if anyone wanted to see, you probably don't. Take a quick look and then look away fast. Tom Trong put his prediction on the 30-year fixed rate, 7% by end of year 22, 8 by 23, 9 by 24, and 10 in 25. Now, this is a guy who was a CFO for a Fortune 1000. Like, this is a numbers guy.
Yeah,
So
that's scary.
I
Yeah.
think it could be 9 this year. And Tom and I haven't even spoken.
Wow.
So the one, I was listening to a good podcast. It's actually EXP team. Don't ask me their names right now, but they do a great podcast, and they were saying they did not think we were going to have like a crash or anything like that. That things, we're seeing an adjust, and then we're going to level out. And also the other factor right now, like you said, Kenny, equity, but also rents are historically high. So that's a little different than we've seen.
Yeah. Well, I want to respect everyone's time, so I'm going to say thank you so much, Kenny. Hey, everybody, I just put 2 links in the chat. I want to explain what they are. The first one, interestingly, if you've ever lost, maybe everyone knows this, I did not. If you've ever lost your password into EXP, this is for EXP agents. I think we have some guests on today. If you've lost your password and one of the ways to retrieve it says to answer the question, and you ever wanted to bash your head against a wall because you know the answer to the question of where was I in January or New Year's Eve on December, New Year's Eve 2020, there is a randomly generated question that doesn't have an answer. That's not the way you have to do it. But you can go into your Okta, click on that link, and you can see where it says what your question is, and you can pick a question. There's a whole bunch of questions, and you can put an answer in there. So your secret question, you can make it whatever you want or pick one of those and then put your answer in. But the auto-generated one that happens when you lose your password is not the real one. It's like a crazy auto thing. Like the guy's was, what was the mascot? Last night when I lost my thing, couldn't figure it out. What was the mascot of the first sports team you ever played in? And he's like, I'm a tech geek. I've never played on a sports team. He goes, I don't even. And I knew where I was on New Year's Eve 2000. I kept putting in the same thing over and over, and I couldn't get out of that loop. So anyway, that's my number 1 tip. Number 2 tip, there was a great leadership meeting today at 11 where Rich Tomasini and Elizabeth Riley presented some great stuff on listings. And they also, again, invited everyone to join the Family Tree EXP Workplace group. I actually posted today's meeting on there as well. That's a group that specifically is aiming to bring together all different revenue share lines. My folks know because I've said this a couple times out to them, but the resources are amazing. They actually do huddles every day of the week. Different people, Elizabeth, Rich, Mitch Ryback, who's been on our mastermind. They do huddles every day of the week. It's just another great collaboration space and tool for everybody. So I wanted to share both those resources. Change your secret answer question and join Family Tree. So with that, tons of thank yous for you, Kenny. Tons of great info. I really appreciate you all being here. Next month, we have this fabulous guy that I met at the Icon Breakfast and Shareholders who is a whiz on YouTube. He's like recruited 38 people in the first couple months. I mean, he's amazing. So that's going to be in August. You'll get plenty of info before that. So thanks again, Kenny. This was awesome. I appreciate your willingness to give
Thanks,
and always
Ken.
pour into us. Thanks, everybody.